The news day continues here on One News Now. I'm Riza Diaz. Prices of goods in the country increased at a steady pace in February, even after global oil and commodity prices jumped during the month. Shaila Francisco has the details.
The country's inflation rate remains steady despite the continuous increase in oil prices. For February, Philippine inflation remains at 3%, much lower than the median analyst forecast of 3.3%. The Philippine Statistics Authority said this is because of food prices easing, which countered higher crude prices.
Pag tumaas talaga yung presyo sa world market, sa fuels for example, mabilis doon pumapasok sa basket ng transport at yung housing, water, electricity, gas and other fuels. Sa ibang mga groups like food, ito ay depende sa iba. I think there is an improvement in the supply chain. In particular, may nakita kaming pagbaba ng presyo ng specific na mga items sa market.
Last month's inflation rate is well within the government's target of 2 to 4%. But in an interview with Business World Live, economist Nikki Mapa says impact from the Ukraine conflict may sink in soon.
And the ongoing geopolitical developments, conflict, definitely not yet reflected in this February print. Going forward, we can see inflation accelerating rather quickly. I think we're going to likely feel the impact as early as March.
The National Economic and Development Authority is now keeping a close watch on the Ukraine-Russia conflict and its effect on commodity prices. NEDA is fast-tracking measures that will provide subsidies to affected sectors. The agency is also looking at increasing food supply. NEDA is proposing for the entire country to be placed under Alert Level 1. This is to allow workers to earn more income and to strengthen the domestic economy. Shaila Francisco, we are One News.
The National Economic and Development Authority, along with other economic managers, are set to discuss possible relief amid the continuous increase of oil prices. In yesterday's Laging Handa briefing, NEDA Undersecretary Rosemary Edilion noted that the effects of soaring oil prices have not been significantly felt in local commodities in February, but that situation may change in March. With this, De Leon said the government's economic managers will identify short-term and long-term solutions to the possible effects of the oil prices in local commodities.
Kailangan talaga magbukas ang ating ekonomiya para dumami po yung produksyon. Masolusyonan din yung ating mga supply chain bottlenecks kasi kung lahat po bukas, yung mga sektor po ay lahat bukas to. So maiibsan po natin yung supply chain bottlenecks na yon, mababawas po yun sa magiging kadagdagan ng presyo. So yun po ang isa sa talagang nakikita naming agarang solusyon dito, no? Kailangan magbukas ang ating ekonomiya para mapababa natin ang presyo, especially po yung sa food, yung food prices po.
A U.S. investment bank says demand destruction is the only thing that can stop the rise in oil prices after the U.S. and European allies imposed sanctions on Russia. Let's find out more in this Bloomberg interview.
His short-term forecast for Brent, 115 a barrel. But what's the upside, Damien? How high could we go?
Guy, I think the key here is that the upside is actually significant. In normal times, the oil market has three buffers. We have inventories, we have supply elasticity, and demand elasticity. We have no buffer in terms of inventories left. And what shale producers have just told us once again is that the elasticity is quite small. So we're down to the last buffer, which is demand destruction. And it's one that requires big price moves, right? So if you look at the move from 100 to 115 that we've seen over 1 week, that on our mapping would be pretty much a 1 month disruption to Russian flows. But those flows are enormous, right? They're 5% of the entire oil market in terms of what goes on a boat out of Russia. So if that persists for 3 months, now we're talking $150 oil prices, right? And I think that's really the core of where we stand in the oil market today. No buffers outside of demand destruction. The potential upside as a result becomes significant.
Well, Damien, there's calls for even further than 150. I think we have 185 in some shops that they're looking at. Let's talk about what can actually make up some of the Russian supply. We see a little bit of an OPEC resistance to amp up their supply more than the $400,000 a barrel. So is the only option here coming down to shale producers? What do you think?
Yeah, let's break it down, right? So, Saudi, UAE on paper have capacity to do more. And realistically, if we look at what they've done in recent years, could perhaps add 1.5 million. It has to be a unanimous decision within OPEC Plus, of which Russia is a member, Iran is a member. So, that's not an easy decision, but conceptually that's there. Iran potentially coming back online, 500,000 initially, 1 million over a year. So that's already 2, if you want, million barrels per day. Shale doesn't respond instantaneously, right? Despite being its short cycle, it needs the cash flow to spend. You have bottlenecks on services, the same labor issues that we see everywhere else in the US. So maybe that's 1 million over another year, right? So that's 2 maybe in the next few months, 3 potentially over a year, year and a half. That can help. But again, Russia puts 5 million barrels per day on boats. So we do need to see a normalization, a recovery, at least in flows. Second, if you bring that supply online, okay, you can match the lost molecules, but you have nothing left, right? That's the core point. The oil market is inherently volatile. Yesterday we lost some Libya output. Over the weekend, we lost some Iraq output. If you're bringing all those barrels, there is nothing left, right? So it is still bullish, even if you can find the supply to meet consumption needs.
It sounds like you're saying that there's really very little buffer in terms of where else you can get the supply, if not for the Middle East, even if you do get those barrels at a lag. Talk to us a little bit about when they would perhaps have to pull out the more extreme option, which of course is the Saudi spare capacity in particular. My understanding is that if that is a level that's ever breached, you start to see the oil market panic even further. But is this a situation that might justify that?
Potentially, again, it goes back to, the enormity of the flows that come out of Russia. So, if those are persistently disrupted to some extent, then it creates a significant call on that spare capacity. And, we know, like we look at April 2020, we know Saudi Arabia, UAE, those core OPEC producers can flex production. But as you said, the flip side of that is then there is really nothing left.
We'll be back with more stories after the break. Keep it here on One News. Still watching One News Now, I'm Riza Diaz. The SSS has given an ultimatum for their 3 million senior pensioners to comply with the annual confirmation of pensioners or ACOP until March 31st, 2022. Thousands of senior pensioners are now flocking to all SSS branch offices and the main office in Quezon City to comply with their annual confirmation of the pensions as required by ACOP. Journalist Emmanuel Gaslani lamented the methods used by SSS may be difficult for majority of the senior pensioners in the provinces. Gaslani appealed for the SSS to allow senior pensioners to comply with ACOP by personal appearance instead. Now, while all the spotlight has been on Vice President Leni Robredo, her daughter Aika was given the podium to talk more about her mother. Laila Pangilinan has a story.
Vice presidential daughter Aika Robredo suddenly found herself on the hot seat during the Special Women's Month Forum of Isang Bayan, where her mother, VP Leni Robredo, was the topic. This is the first time that the vice president's firstborn took on the spotlight since the start of the campaign period. During the forum, VP Leni was described by Aika through her lens. The vice presidential daughter also answered a lot of curious questions from the media.
Describe mo yung nanay mo in one sentence, ha? Walang filter kung ano yung unang maisip, yun kaagad ang sabihin. Okay? Ready? Mother.
Ako, si Mama is everything I aspire to be.
Wife.
Selfless.
Person.
Gracious.
Public servant.
All in. Pwede ba yun? Pwede ba may dash?
Robredo's daughter also faced a sort of beauty pageant-like question.
Do you believe your mother will be a good president and why?
Yes, very much so. Good president kasi tingin ko she has proven time and again kung ano yung kaya niyang gawin. So we can only imagine kung ano pa kaya kung magkaroon siya ng access to different agencies.
VP Leni's firstborn also feels that her mother hasn't moved on from her father's passing and praised for her mom's closure.
Ngayon na parang patagal siya. Parang yung pakiramdam din namin na po-prolong yung proseso ng pag-grieve niya. Kaya siguro ito rin yung isa sa mga reasons kung bakit ayaw na sana namin siyang tumakbo pa.
Aika also revealed that her mother is not emotional, but recalls one of the few incidents that the vice president has shed some tears.
Hindi talaga siya iyakin as a person. And while yun yung maganda sa kanya, I think nababalanse niya na very empathetic siya.
Aika also shared that memes and parodies about her mother always gave them a good laugh instead of making her mother angry.
Yung memes na enjoy namin siya panoorin and tingnan. Pastime namin yan. Parang wala pa naman ako nakitang meme na nainis kami or na-offend. Kasi we actually appreciate it. If anything, siguro may naabot silang hindi namin normally maaabot and nagsisimula siya sa humor.
Aside from having plans for the country, VP Leni has a lot of options in line if ever she loses in the upcoming polls.
Una, magbabakasyon siya kasi I think sobrang well-deserved din na magbakasyon. Marami po siyang pwede gawin sa totoo lang. Pwede siya maging abogada ulit, pwede siya maging consultant. Ako po personally, ini-encourage ko siya na mag-leadership fellowship na naaral para productive.
VP Leni's firstborn also said in behalf of her siblings that their mother is their life and the only one they've got, but they don't mind sharing her if it would benefit the whole country. For News 5, Laila Pangilinan, We Are One News.
And those are the top stories of the hour. Join us later at 12 noon as we continue to monitor the day's biggest stories. You can also catch One News on Signal Play app. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Riza Diaz. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.